Jiwoo walked into the huge training hall of the Galactic Defense Academy and felt very small. The ceiling was so high she could barely see it, and the walls were covered with strange alien symbols that glowed with soft blue light. She carried her small bag and looked around at all the different creatures that would be her classmates for the next year. The hall was full of aliens that looked like nothing she had ever seen before. There were tall beings with crystal skin that sparkled when they moved, and their faces looked like they were carved from diamond. These were the Altarians, and Jiwoo knew from her study materials that they were considered some of the best warriors in the galaxy. Their home planet had 3 suns, and the constant light had made their skin as hard as armor. Near the front of the hall stood a group of massive creatures that looked like walking mountains. They had thick gray skin and muscles that bulged under their natural armor plating. These were the Thorak, and even the smallest one was twice as tall as Jiwoo. Their deep voices rumbled like thunder when they talked, and the floor seemed to shake with each step they took. Jiwoo found an empty seat in the back corner where she could see everyone, but not be noticed. She was used to being overlooked and had learned that watching was often more useful than talking. Her mother had always told her that smart people listen more than they speak, and Jiwoo had taken that lesson to heart. As she sat down, she noticed other species she had only read about in books. There were the Volosians with their bright blue skin and 4 arms that moved so fast they looked like blurs when they gestured. Their eyes were huge and black, and they seemed to see everything at once. Jiwoo watched as one of them caught a falling datapad without even looking in that direction. The Seraphim were beautiful creatures with wings that changed colors like oil on water. They floated just above their seats, instead of sitting, and their voices sounded like music when they spoke to each other. Jiwoo thought they looked like angels from old Earth stories, but she knew they were actually from a planet where the gravity was so light that flying was easier. Then walking in one corner sat beings that looked like they were made of living metal. Their bodies reflected the light from the walls, and when they moved, Jiwoo could hear soft clicking sounds like computer keys. These were the mechanoids, and they came from a world where organic life had merged with technology so completely that the line between living and machine had disappeared. Jiwoo pulled out her notebook and started drawing what she saw. She was not a great artist, but her mother had taught her that drawing helped her remember details better. As she sketched the different aliens, she noticed things that others might miss. The way the Altarians always kept their backs to walls. The way the Thorak positioned themselves so they could see all exits. The way the Volosians never stopped moving even when they were sitting still. A group of Thorak near the front was talking loudly enough for everyone to hear. One of them, named Kex, was bigger than the others and had scars across his face that showed he had been in real battles. He was looking around the room and his eyes stopped on Jiwoo. "Look at the little Deathworlder," he said, and his voice was so deep it made Jiwoo's chest vibrate. "She comes from a planet so dangerous that most species cannot even visit it yet. She looks like she would break if someone touched her too hard." The other Thorak laughed, and the sound was like rocks falling down a mountain. Jiwoo felt her face get warm, but she did not look away. She had heard this kind of talk before humans were new to the galactic community, and most aliens only knew Earth from the warning labels that said it was too dangerous for normal life. Earth had more gravity than most planets, and the air was full of oxygen, which was poisonous to many species. The weather was unpredictable and violent, with storms that could destroy cities. The planet was covered with creatures that killed and ate each other, and even the plants could be deadly. But to Jiwoo, it was just home. She knew that other species called Earth a death world and its people Deathworlders, like it was some kind of curse. But Jiwoo also knew that growing up on Earth had made humans different in ways that most aliens did not understand. They were stronger than they looked and could adapt to almost anything. And when they needed to fight, they could be more dangerous than creatures twice their size. "I wonder if the Academy made a mistake accepting her," said another Thorak named Grix. "Maybe they felt sorry for her species and wanted to give them a chance to prove they are not completely useless." Jiwoo kept drawing in her notebook, but now she was sketching the way the Thorak stood and moved. She noticed that for all their size and strength, they were actually quite slow. Their movements were powerful but predictable, and they seemed to rely on their natural armor instead of speed or tactics. Volosian named Bix turned around in his seat to look at her. His 4 arms never stopped moving, and his huge eyes seemed to take in every detail. Why is she so quiet? He asked in his fast, clicking voice. Most new students cannot stop talking about their home planets and their achievements, but she has not said a single word. Maybe she cannot speak properly, suggested a seraphim named Yara. Her voice was like singing, and even her mean words sounded beautiful. Some primitive species have trouble with the universal translators. Jiwoo understood every word they said, but she did not respond. She had learned long ago that people revealed more about themselves when they thought no one important was listening. These aliens were showing her exactly how they thought and what they expected, and that information would be very useful later. The truth was that Jiwoo was not quiet because she was scared or stupid. She was quiet because she was learning everything these aliens said and did was teaching her something about how they fought and how they thought she was like a hunter studying her prey. Except she was studying potential teammates and enemies. Her notebook was filling up with observations about each species. The Altarians were proud and liked to show off their crystal armor, but they also seemed to avoid physical contact with others. The Thorak were confident in their strength, but they moved in predictable patterns. The Volosians were fast, but they seemed nervous and jumpy, like they were always ready to run away. The Seraphim acted superior to everyone else, but Jiwoo noticed they kept checking to make sure others were looking at them. The mechanoids were hard to read, but they seemed to be recording everything that happened, which meant they were probably as interested in gathering information as she was. As more students entered the hall, Jiwoo saw that she was the only human among hundreds of aliens. This did not surprise her, since Earth had only recently joined the galactic community, and very few humans had been accepted into the prestigious academy. She was probably one of the first humans most of these aliens had ever seen in person. The other students continued to talk about her like she was not there or could not understand them. Some wondered if humans were actually intelligent or just clever animals. Others debated whether Earth was really as dangerous as the reports claimed. A few seemed genuinely curious about what humans could do, but most dismissed her as a curiosity that would probably fail out of the academy within. The first month, Jiwoo smiled slightly as she listened to their conversations. They had no idea what they were dealing with. Humans had not survived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy by being weak or stupid. They had survived by being adaptable and by never giving up no matter how bad things got. She thought about her training back on Earth, where she had learned to fight in every kind of environment from frozen mountains to burning deserts. She remembered the lessons her instructors had taught her about using an opponent's strength against them, and about waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The other students would learn soon enough what humans were really capable of. But for now, Jiwoo was content to sit quietly and watch and learn, because when the time came to show what she could do, she wanted to be ready for anything. The morning sun cast strange shadows through the academy windows as Commander Vex entered the training hall. His crystalline body caught the light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. The alien instructor was old even by Altarian standards, and his face showed the wear of countless battles across the galaxy. Every student in the hall knew his reputation as one of the finest warriors who had ever lived. Jiwoo remained in her corner seat watching as the commander moved to the center of the room. His four arms moved with practiced precision as he activated the holographic display system. The air above his head filled with images of complex battlefield scenarios and weapon systems that looked more advanced than anything humans had ever built. Today you will face the Omega simulation, Commander Vex announced, and his voice carried clearly to every corner of the massive hall. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves thanks to the advanced speaker system. This simulation has been the final test for elite warriors for over 300 years. The alien students leaned forward with interest, and Jiwoo could see excitement and nervousness in their various expressions. The Thorak looked confident as always, while the Volosians seemed to vibrate with barely contained energy. The Seraphim floated higher above their seats and their wings shimmered with different colors. No cadet in the history of this academy has ever completed the Omega simulation in less than 5 minutes, the commander continued. The current record stands at 4 minutes and 37 seconds. It was set by Thorak warrior Prince Gorth, who went on to become Supreme Commander of the 4th Fleet. At the mention of Gorth, several Thorak students puffed out their massive chests with pride. Kex, the scarred warrior who had mocked Jiwoo earlier, stood up slightly and flexed his enormous muscles. It was clear he expected to break his species record and bring even more honor. To the Thorak name. The simulation will test everything you have learned, Commander Vex explained as new images appeared in the holographic display. Combat reflexes, tactical thinking, environmental adaptation, and survival instincts. You will face scenarios that have challenged the greatest warriors in galactic history. Some of you may not survive even in simulation mode. Jiwoo watched the display images carefully. She saw urban combat zones with collapsing buildings and enemy forces using advanced weapons. There were space station scenarios with hull breaches and zero-gravity combat. There were jungle environments with hostile wildlife and poison gas attacks. Each scenario looked more dangerous than the last. The simulation adapts to each participant's species and capabilities, the commander added. What challenges a Thorak warrior will be different from what challenges a Voloshian speedfighter or an Altarian crystal guard. But make no mistake, the difficulty level remains the same for everyone. Voloshian student named Bix raised one of his forearms. His bright blue skin seemed to glow with confidence, and his huge black eyes were focused intently on the commander. "Sir," he said in his rapid, clicking voice, "I request permission to attempt the simulation first. My species has the fastest reflexes in the known galaxy, Commander." Vex nodded slowly. "Very well, Cadet Bix. You may begin. The rest of you will observe and learn from his attempt. Pay attention to his techniques and decision-making. Every failure teaches us something valuable." The simulation chamber was a massive room with walls that could create any environment through advanced holographic projection and force field technology. As Bix entered the chamber, Jiwoo could see him, checking his equipment and stretching his forearms in preparation. His movements were so fast they created brief after-images in the air. The chamber sealed with a soft hiss and immediately filled with a complex battlefield scenario. Buildings rose from the floor while enemy targets appeared on rooftops and behind cover. Laser fire began crisscrossing the space in deadly patterns, while explosive devices activated randomly throughout the area. Bix disappeared into motion that was almost too fast for the other students to follow. His blue form became a blur as he darted between laser bolts and explosive blasts. Jiwoo could barely track his movement, but she noticed he was following predictable patterns. His speed was incredible, but his tactics were simple and direct. The watching students cheered as Bix eliminated target after target with precise energy weapon fire. His forearms allowed him to fire in multiple directions at once, while his incredible speed kept him ahead of the simulation's responses. The Voloshian students were especially loud in their support, calling out encouragement in their rapid, clicking language. But Jiwoo noticed something the others missed. Bix was getting tired. His movements were slowing slightly, and his breathing was becoming labored. The simulation was designed to test endurance as well as skill, and even Voloshian speed had limits. 4 minutes and 12 seconds later, Bix emerged from the chamber exhausted but victorious. His blue skin was covered in sweat, and his forearms were shaking slightly from the effort. The simulation had pushed him to his absolute limits, but he had completed it successfully. The hall erupted in cheers and applause from the Voloshian students while other species offered respectful acknowledgement. Bix had set a respectable time, though he had not broken the existing record. Commander Vex nodded approvingly and made notes on his datapad. "Who will attempt the simulation next?" the commander asked, looking. Around the hall, several hands and appendages shot up immediately. The competitive spirit among the alien students was fierce, and each species wanted to prove their superiority. A massive thorax named Rex stepped forward. His gray skin was covered in natural armor plating, and his muscles looked like they could crush steel. His voice rumbled like distant thunder when he spoke. "I will show these speed demons what real power can accomplish." Rex entered the simulation chamber with confidence that bordered on arrogance. His strategy was completely different from Bix. Instead of avoiding obstacles, he smashed through them. His massive fists destroyed walls, and his thick skin absorbed damage that would have killed smaller beings. The watching students were amazed by Rex's raw power. He picked up simulated vehicles and threw them at enemy positions. He punched through reinforced walls like they were made of paper. When explosive devices detonated near him, he simply walked through the flames and continued his assault. But Rex's approach had a major weakness. Jiwoo could see that he was wasting energy with his brute force methods. While impressive, his technique lacked efficiency. He was solving problems through overwhelming power rather than smart tactics. 6 minutes and 43 seconds later, Rex completed the simulation. His time was much slower than Bix, but he had succeeded through sheer determination. The thorax students roared their approval while Rex flexed his massive arms in victory. Next came Nala, an Altarian whose crystal skin could generate powerful energy shields. Her approach was defensive, waiting for enemies to attack and then countering with precise energy blasts. Her crystal armor deflected most incoming fire while her shields protected her from explosions. Nala time was 5 minutes and 18 seconds, which was better than Rex, but still not close to the record. Her defensive strategy had kept her safe, but had also slowed down her progress through the simulation. One by one other students attempted the simulation. A seraphim named Yara used her flight ability to attack from above, but her elegant fighting style was not well suited for the brutal scenarios the simulation presented. Her time was over 7 minutes. A mechanoid student approached the challenge with computer-like precision, calculating optimal paths and weapon trajectories. His mechanical body was nearly indestructible, but his movements were too predictable. The simulation adapted to his patterns and his time was 6 minutes even. Through all these attempts, Jiwoo sat quietly in her corner seat. She was not taking notes like some of the other students or discussing strategy with anyone. She simply watched with those dark eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of what she saw. The other students began to notice her continued silence. A group of seraphim whispered among themselves about the strange human who never spoke or moved. Velocian students made rapid, clicking sounds that their translators rendered as laughter when they looked in her direction. "Look at the little Deathworlder," said a thorax student named Grix. "She has not moved once since the demonstrations began. Perhaps she is too frightened to attempt the simulation. Maybe humans are not as dangerous as their planet reputation suggests." Even some of the more respectful students began to wonder if Jiwoo was capable of attempting the simulation at all. Her small size and quiet demeanor made her seem completely out of place among the powerful alien warriors who had already proven their skills. Commander Vex noticed the whispers and glances directed at Jiwoo. He had been watching her carefully during the other attempts, and something about her stillness reminded him of old military legends about predators who went completely motionless before striking. "Cadet Jiwoo." The commander called out, his crystalline voice cutting through the murmur of conversation. "You have observed many different approaches to the simulation. Do you wish to attempt it yourself, or do you need more time to prepare?" All eyes in the hall turned to the small human girl who had been sitting so quietly in the back corner. For the first time since entering the academy, Jiwoo became the center of attention. Every alien student was looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Jiwoo Stowe. Jiwoo walked toward the simulation chamber with steps that seemed almost casual, but every alien in the hall could sense something different about her now. The way she moved had changed from the quiet student who had sat in the corner to something else entirely. Her posture was straighter and her eyes held a focus that made even the bravest thorax warriors feel uncomfortable. The massive chamber door slid open with a soft whisper of advanced technology, and Jiwoo paused at the threshold. Turned back to look at the assembled students and instructors, and for just a moment her expression was completely unreadable. Then she stepped inside, and the door sealed behind her with a final click. Commander Vex activated the observation systems, and the walls of the training hall became transparent, allowing everyone to see inside the simulation chamber. The space was currently empty and featureless, but they all knew that would change the moment the test began. Advanced holographic projectors and force field generators could create any environment or challenge imaginable. "Remember," the commander announced to the watching students, "the simulation will be calibrated for human parameters. This means it will account for their lower gravity, tolerance, reduced atmospheric pressure requirements, and other biological limitations." The unspoken message was clear to everyone. The test would be easier for Jiwoo than it had been for the stronger and more capable alien species. Several students, exchanged glances that seemed to say the human girl would have an unfair advantage. Inside the chamber, Jiwoo stood perfectly still in the center of the space. Her eyes were closed and her breathing had become slow and controlled. She looked almost like she was meditating or preparing for sleep, rather than the most challenging combat simulation in galactic military history. "What is she doing?" whispered Yara, the beautiful seraphim whose wings had stopped their usual color changes and were now a worried shade of pale blue. "She looks like she is not even aware of where she is. Maybe humans need time to process information," suggested Bix the Velocian, whose 4 arms were moving nervously as he spoke. "Perhaps their brains work more slowly than ours, and she needs extra time to understand what is happening." The other students began to murmur among themselves. Some wondered if Jiwoo was having some kind of medical emergency. Others suggested that maybe humans went into a trance state before fighting. But Commander Vex remained silent, watching the small human with growing interest. 30 seconds passed and Jiwoo had not moved at all. The simulation had not yet begun, but most cadets would have been checking their equipment or examining the chamber for tactical advantages. Instead, she stood like a statue with her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "Begin simulation," Commander Vex announced, and the chamber exploded into chaos. Instantly, the empty space transformed into a complex urban battlefield. Buildings rose from the floor, reaching toward the ceiling, while streets formed between them. Enemy combat robots materialized on rooftops and behind cover, while automated defense turrets emerged from hidden positions. The air filled with the sound of weapons charging and targeting systems activating. Laser fire immediately began crisscrossing the chamber in deadly patterns that would have forced any normal cadet to dive for cover. Explosive devices started detonating randomly throughout the area, sending chunks of simulated debris flying in all directions. The environmental systems activated toxic gas protocols, while gravity fluctuations made movement unpredictable. But Jiwoo did not move. She stood in the exact center of the chaos with laser bolts passing inches from her body. The watching students pressed closer to the observation windows, their various expressions of amusement turning to confusion and concern. Several explosive blasts went off close enough to her position that the shockwaves should have knocked her down. Still, she remained motionless. "What is wrong with her?" demanded Rex, the massive thorac whose scarred face showed genuine worry. "She is going to be killed if she does not start moving. The simulation does not care if she is too scared to fight," but Commander Vex was watching Jiwoo's face, and what he saw there was not fear. It was concentration so intense, it was almost frightening. Her eyes were tracking the movement of every laser bolt, every explosion, every enemy position with mechanical precision. She was not frozen with terror. She was calculating. The simulation continued to escalate, adding more enemies, more environmental hazards, more chaos designed to force participants into immediate action. The difficulty was ramping up faster than normal, as the system detected that its target was not responding to the initial threats. 15 seconds had passed since the simulation began. 15 seconds of Jiwoo standing perfectly still while death flew around her in a dozen different forms. The alien students were beginning to panic, thinking they were about to witness the first fatality in Academy simulation history. "She is lost." Her mind said Grix, another thorac warrior whose massive hands were pressed against the observation window. "The human brain must not be able to handle this level of stress. We should stop the simulation before she gets herself killed." But something in Commander Vex's military experience told him to wait. There was something about Jiwoo's stillness that reminded him of stories from the ancient wars, tales of apex predators who went completely motionless before delivering a killing strike. Legends of warriors who could find perfect calm in the heart of battle. The environmental systems in the chamber began cycling through different atmospheric conditions: low oxygen that would make most species dizzy, high gravity that would crush smaller beings, toxic gases that burned the lungs, extreme temperatures that could freeze or cook living tissue. But Jiwoo breathing remained steady and controlled. 20 seconds had passed and the simulation was now running at maximum difficulty. Enemy robots were appearing faster than most species could track them. Weapons fire was so dense it looked like a solid wall of light. Explosions were going off continuously, making the entire chamber shake through it all. Jiwoo stood like a statue carved from stone. Her small human form looked impossibly fragile, surrounded by such overwhelming violence, but her eyes never stopped moving. Tracking, calculating, waiting for something that only she could see. The alien students had gone completely silent. Now even the proudest Thorac warriors and the fastest Velocians were staring in amazement at this tiny human who seemed to be ignoring certain death. The only sounds in the training hall were the muffled explosions and weapon fire coming from the simulation chamber. 30 seconds passed, then 40, then 50. Still Jiwoo did not move. The simulation systems were beginning to strain under the load of generating so many threats simultaneously. Some of the enemy robots were nearly touching her position, but she seemed completely unaware of their presence. "This is impossible," whispered Nala. The Altarian, whose crystal skin had gone completely transparent with shock. No living being can remain that still while under such intense attack. Her nervous system should have forced her to move by now. But Commander Vex was beginning to understand what he was witnessing. This was not paralysis or fear. This was something far more dangerous. Jiwoo was not ignoring the chaos around her. She was learning from it. Every explosion, every laser bolt, every enemy movement was teaching her something about the simulations, patterns, and weaknesses. 1 minute passed, and the simulation reached a level of difficulty that no cadet had ever faced. The chamber was filled with so much violence and chaos that it was hard to see Jiwoo's small form, through all the smoke and energy blasts. But she was still there, still standing, still waiting. The alien students were no longer making jokes about the weak human girl. They were watching in fascination and growing fear as this tiny being from the death world called Earth demonstrated something beyond their understanding. She was showing them what 3 billion years of evolution on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy had created. And then at exactly 1 minute and 13 seconds into the simulation, Jiwoo opened her eyes fully for the first time. What the watching aliens saw in those dark depths made several of them step back. From the observation windows, it was not the look of a frightened student or a confused primitive. It was the gaze of an apex predator that had just finished studying its prey and was ready to hunt. The calm before the storm was over, and the storm was about to be unleashed in ways that would change galactic military history forever. The small human girl from Earth was finally ready to move, and when she did, the entire galaxy would learn what the word Deathworlder really meant. What happened next would be remembered in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Jiwoo moved, and when she did, it was like watching physics itself bend to her will. The small human girl who had stood motionless for over a minute suddenly exploded into motion with a violence that defied every law of biology. The alien students thought they understood. She did not run toward her enemies like the Thorac had done. She did not dart between obstacles like the Velocians. Instead, she flowed through the chaos like liquid death itself, moving in ways that seemed to bend space around her body. Laser bolts that should have hit her passed through empty air, as if she had never been there at all. Her first target was a combat robot positioned on a building 12 feet above the ground. Any normal cadet would have looked for stairs or a ladder, or tried to find a way to climb. But Jiwoo simply bent down and picked up a chunk of debris from one of the earlier explosions. Her small hands gripped the jagged piece of metal and she hurled it upward with inhuman precision. The debris struck the robot's power core with surgical accuracy, destroying it instantly. But Jiwoo was already moving before the machine hit the ground. She had calculated exactly where it would fall, and was using its descending bulk as a stepping stone to launch herself toward a cluster of aerial drones that had been trying to target her. The watching aliens pressed against the observation windows, unable to believe what they were seeing. Jiwoo's hands moved in patterns too fast for most of them to follow, but each strike disabled multiple enemies at once. She was not just fighting the simulation. She was conducting it like a deadly orchestra. "This is impossible," whispered Rex, the massive Thorac whose scarred face had gone pale. "No being that small should be able to move like that. She is defying the laws of physics." But Commander Vex was watching with the eye of a veteran warrior, and he could see the truth. Jiwoo was not breaking the laws of physics, she was using them. Her every movement was calculated to use momentum gravity and the enemy's own force against them. She fought like someone who had studied violence itself and learned all its secrets. A group of ground-based combat robots surrounded Ji-woo's position, but instead of being trapped, she used their encirclement as an advantage. She moved between them so quickly that their targeting systems could not keep up. Each robot was trying to fire at where she had been while she was already somewhere else entirely. When the robots fired, they hit each other. Instead of their target, Ji-woo had turned their superior numbers into a weakness by positioning herself so that their own weapons became her allies. Within seconds, the entire squad had destroyed itself while she remained completely unharmed. The environmental systems in the chamber began their most deadly phase. Gravity suddenly tripled, making movement nearly impossible. For most species, the air filled with toxic gas that burned lungs and eyes. Temperature dropped to levels that would freeze blood in most beings' veins. Ji-woo adapted instantly. When the gravity increased, her movements became more grounded, but lost none of their deadly precision. She had lived her entire life under Earth gravity, which was already higher than most planets. When toxic gas flooded the chamber, she simply held her breath and moved with even greater urgency, turning the environmental hazard into motivation rather than obstacle. She has been training for this her entire life, realized Nala, the Altarian whose crystal skin was shimmering with amazement. Every day on her homeworld was preparation for this moment. Earth truly is a Deathworld, and she is its daughter. The simulation threw everything it had at Ji-woo's ceiling: mounted turrets that could track at light speed, energy barriers that would stop most weapons, environmental hazards that changed every few seconds. Enemy, robots with adaptive programming that learned from each encounter, but nothing could touch her. Ji-woo moved through the chamber like she owned it, using every surface, every obstacle, every piece of debris as a tool or weapon. When a wall blocked her path, she ran up it. When enemies tried to corner her, she used the walls and ceiling to attack from impossible angles. The alien students watching had gone completely silent. They were witnessing something beyond their understanding. This small human was not just completing the simulation. She was dominating it in ways that made their own attempts look clumsy and primitive. She uses everything as a weapon. Observed Bix the Velocian, whose 4 arms were trembling slightly. The walls, the ceiling, the debris, even the bodies of destroyed enemies. She fights like the entire chamber is an extension of her own body. Commander Vex found himself thinking of ancient military texts he had studied. Stories of legendary warriors who could turn any battlefield to their advantage, warriors who fought not with superior strength or speed, but with a kind of tactical intelligence that bordered on prescience. Ji-woo was demonstrating something that went beyond training or natural ability. She was showing them what happened when a species evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them. Every day of her life had been combat training. Every challenge she had ever faced had prepared her for this moment. The simulation reached its climax as massive, heavy assault robots began emerging from hidden positions. These machines were designed to be nearly indestructible, requiring coordinated attacks from multiple cadets. To defeat, previous students had spent minutes carefully planning their approach. To these final enemies, Ji-woo looked at the first heavy robot for exactly half a second, then moved straight toward it. The machine was 3 times her height and armed with enough firepower to level a city block. Its armor was designed to withstand direct hits from starship cannons, and its weapons could track targets moving at supersonic speeds. But Ji-woo was not where the weapons were aiming. She was where they were going to be, moving through spaces that would not exist until she created them. At the last possible moment, she slid beneath the robot's massive frame and found a maintenance panel that the simulation designers had hidden as an almost impossible bonus objective. While the robot spun around trying to locate her, Ji-woo hands flew over the control interface with impossible speed and precision. She was not trying to damage the machine systems. She was reprogramming them. Her fingers moved faster than most computer processors, rewriting combat protocols in seconds. That should have taken hours to understand. The heavy robot suddenly stopped moving, its weapons powering down as its own systems turned against it. Ji-woo had not destroyed it. She had converted it, turning the simulation's most powerful enemy into her Ally then with casual efficiency, she activated the robot's self-destruct sequence and walked away as it collapsed behind her. The explosion lit up the entire chamber, but she did not even look back. The remaining heavy robots tried to coordinate their attack, but Jiwoo was already among them, moving with such speed and precision that they could not track her movements. She disabled each one with the same casual efficiency, reprogramming their systems and turning them against each other. In the observation area, the alien students stood in stunned silence watching this tiny human girl systematically dismantle the most advanced combat simulation in galactic history. She was not just completing the test, she was rewriting the rules of warfare. Itself, Commander Vex looked at his chronometer and felt something like religious awe wash over him. From the moment Jiwoo had started moving to the destruction of the last heavy robot, exactly 12 seconds had passed. 12 seconds to accomplish what had taken other cadets minutes to achieve. But the simulation was not over yet. The final challenge was about to begin, and it would test everything Jiwoo had learned about combat tactics and survival. The ultimate test that would separate the legends from the merely skilled was still to come, and as the chamber began to reconfigure itself for the final phase, Jiwoo stood in the center of the destruction she had caused, breathing normally and completely unharmed. The Deathworld had awakened, and the galaxy was about to learn what that truly meant. The simulation chamber began its final transformation, and the alien students watching knew they were about to witness the ultimate test that had never been completed by any single cadet in the Academy's 300-year history. The walls shifted and reconfigured themselves while the floor opened to reveal the most advanced combat construct ever designed. The final Guardian rose from the depths of the chamber like a mechanical mountain. It stood 30 feet tall with armor plating that could withstand nuclear explosions and weapon systems that could destroy entire city blocks. Its design incorporated the best technology from every major species in the galaxy, and it had been programmed with the combat knowledge of 1,000 legendary warriors. This construct had been the end of countless military careers. Even the most skilled cadets working in perfect teams had struggled to defeat it. The current record for destroying the final Guardian was held by a combined unit of 12 elite thorac warriors, and it had taken them over 20 minutes of coordinated assault. Previous cadets had used careful strategy and coordinated attacks to even damage the massive machine. Most attempts ended in failure, with the construct still standing while the cadets were eliminated by its overwhelming firepower. But Jiwoo stood alone in the center of the chamber, facing this mechanical giant, with nothing but her small human frame and whatever skills her Deathworld had taught her. The construct weapon systems came online with a sound like thunder and immediately began tracking toward Jiwoo's position. Laser cannons that could melt through starship hulls swiveled to target her, while missile pods loaded with enough explosive power to crater mountains prepared to fire energy shields that had never been penetrated, activated around the machine's massive frame. In the observation area, Commander Vex felt his crystalline heart beating faster than it had in decades. He had seen the finest warriors in galactic history attempt this challenge, and even they had approached it with careful preparation and tactical support. The idea that this small human girl could face the final Guardian alone seemed beyond impossible, but Jiwoo looked at the towering construct for exactly half a second, and then she moved. What happened next defied every principle of military tactics that had been developed over thousands of years of galactic warfare. Instead of seeking cover or trying to find a safe approach vector, Jiwoo ran straight at the final Guardian in a direct frontal assault that should have been suicide. The construct's weapons opened fire with enough concentrated firepower to destroy a small moon laser beams, thick as tree trunks carved through the air, while explosive missiles created a wall of destruction that no living being should have been able to survive. The very air in the chamber seemed to catch fire from the intensity of the assault. But Jiwoo was not where the weapons were firing. She was moving through spaces that existed between the incoming death, creating paths through the destruction that seemed impossible. The watching aliens could barely track her movement as she flowed between laser beams and explosions like she was dancing with death itself. "She is reading the firing patterns," realized Commander Vex with growing amazement. She studied the construct during those first 12 seconds, and now she knows exactly where every weapon will fire before it happens. Jiwoo reached the base of the final Guardian and instead of trying to find some weakness in its armor, she did something that made several watching cadets gasp in disbelief. She began to climb the machine using its own weapons and armor plating as handholds. Her small size became an advantage as she found grips and footholds that larger beings could never have used. The construct tried to shake her off by spinning and using its defensive systems, but Jiwoo moved with such precision that she stayed perfectly balanced no matter what the machine did. She climbed upward with the confidence of someone who had spent her life scaling the dangerous cliffs and mountains of Earth. When she reached the construct's main processing center, Jiwoo did not try to smash through the armor or find some hidden weakness. Instead, she pulled out a small tool from her academy kit and began working on what looked like a minor maintenance panel. Most cadets would not even have noticed the panel, but Jiwoo had spotted it during her initial observation. "What is she doing?" whispered Yara, the seraphim, whose beautiful wings had gone completely white with shock. "She is trying to access the construct's computer systems, but that should be impossible. The security protocols are unbreakable." But Jiwoo's fingers were moving over the interface with the same incredible speed and precision she had shown throughout the simulation. She was not trying to break the security protocols. She was rewriting them using programming techniques that seemed to come from nowhere. The truth was that humans had always been exceptional at understanding and manipulating complex systems. Back on Earth, they had learned to work with everything, from primitive machines to quantum computers, and their brains had evolved to see patterns and connections that other species missed. Within seconds, Jiwoo had gained access to the Final Guardian's core programming, and what she did next would be talked about in military academies for the next 1,000 years. Instead of trying to shut down the construct or damage its systems, she reprogrammed its basic function protocols. The massive machine suddenly stopped its attacks and began powering down its weapon systems. Its energy shields flickered and died while its targeting computers went offline. The Final Guardian, that had never been defeated by any cadet in Academy history, was surrendering to a small human girl who had hacked its brain, but Jiwoo was not finished. She activated the construct's communication systems and spoke in a voice that carried clearly throughout the chamber and into the observation area where the stunned aliens were watching. "Thank you for the interesting challenge," she said calmly, as if she was commenting on the weather. "But I think we can end this simulation now." Then, with casual efficiency that made Commander Vex feel like he was watching a master artist at work, Jiwoo activated the Final Guardian's self-destruct sequence and leaped clear of the collapsing machine. She landed gracefully on the chamber floor and walked toward the exit, as 30 feet of the most advanced military technology in the galaxy collapsed into scrap metal behind her. "Simulation complete," announced the chamber's computer system in a voice that seemed somehow surprised. Time elapsed 13 seconds. The training hall was completely silent. Every alien student, instructor, and staff member stood frozen in shock, staring at the small human girl who had just accomplished the impossible. 13 seconds to complete a simulation that had challenged the greatest warriors in galactic history. 13 seconds to rewrite everything they thought they knew about combat and tactics. Commander Vex looked at his chronometer 3 times, unable to believe the reading. His crystalline hands were shaking as he realized he had just witnessed the birth of a legend. The Academy would never be the same, and neither would the galaxy Jiwoo walked out of the simulation chamber with the same economical movements she had shown throughout her time at the Academy. Her breathing was normal, her uniform was clean, and she showed no signs of the incredible violence she had just unleashed. She looked around at the stunned faces surrounding her and allowed herself a small smile. "On Earth," she said quietly, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall, "we call that a warm-up." The silence stretched for another heartbeat as every alien in the room tried to process what they had just witnessed. Then Rex, the massive thorac warrior who had mocked her on the first day, took a step backward. His voice, when it came, was filled with something that might have been reverence or fear. "Deathworlder," he rumbled, and this time it was not an insult. It was recognition of what Jiwoo truly represented. The galaxy had just learned that humans were not the weak primitives they had assumed them to be. They were something far more dangerous. Jiwoo simply nodded once to Commander Vex and returned to her seat in the back corner, ready to observe and learn from whatever came next. But now the other cadets were watching her, waiting to see what other impossible things the girl from the death world might. To the age of human expansion into the galaxy had begun not with grand speeches or diplomatic ceremonies, but with 13 seconds of perfect, terrifying violence that had redefined what was possible in warfare. Every species in the hall knew they had just witnessed the future, and it belonged to the quiet girl from Earth who had sat in the corner and learned all their secrets. From that day forward, when alien military instructors spoke of legendary warriors, they would tell the story of the human girl who completed the impossible simulation in 13 seconds. And cadets from across the galaxy would wonder what other surprises the species from the death world might have in store for them. The universe had just become a much more interesting and dangerous place.